Commander. Well, first of all, it's my pleasure to come to this very important conference. Second, as a former Prime Minister, I know what does it mean, governmental crisis. I think that I am not the reason for that crisis, with my visit. So I wish all the best, for Netherlands, for stability, but we need to remember that democracy from authoritarian regime differs exactly that in democracies, usually periodically you are facing governmental crisis, or governmental changes. So that's what is happening here. Now, second, really, when I came here, I feeling, like back almost at home. Lithuania, if you know, small country on the Baltic Sea, and Netherlands are similar because both of us, we are two, what I call low countries. Our highest hill is 293 meters. Your highest is 322 meters. So we are lower in that championship of lowness. We are lower, And also, since it was mentioned something about cycling, I need to confess that I also like very much, cycling. And, in cycling, there is one basic rule. It's easy to go down the hill. Up the hill demands constant effort and strength and constant movement forward. If you do not move, you fall. In European defense, for quite a long period of time, we love to go down the hill. Americans did our job. It's more or less over. Now we need substantial efforts to go up the hill, and we need movement, we need progress. And we shall do it. I'm sure about that because of the great Dutchman I know in Brussels. He's, I would call, a good friend of mine, and his name is Mark Rutte. And he's doing really a great job. The Hague Summit will be a success. But more seriously, I would like to touch two basic questions about European defense. Where are we, and what do we need to do? And I really spoke some of those lines last week in Aachen, so maybe I will repeat some of those issues, but well, I think that we need to have some kind of broader picture in order for us to understand really both where we are and what do we need to do. So as it was mentioned before, I'm saying to myself, and I think that we can agree on that, that we are facing at the moment three challenges to us, to Europe. One is that the war in Ukraine will continue as long as Putin wants it to continue. Peace is not coming. And in my view, peace through some kind of those diplomacy efforts, which we can praise, will not be achieved. I will elaborate a little bit more about that topic later on. Second, Russia is becoming stronger and more aggressive. And third one, Americans are starting to withdraw from Europe. Definitely for them, China is a priority. Defense Secretary Peter Hegseth recently repeated that. And that is what we need to be ready. But this does not mean that Americans are withdrawing from NATO. And in addition to that, also when we're asking the question where we are, we need to look into the lessons, what I call lessons from Ukraine. And again, next to the militaries, I will not elaborate too much, but I recently was exactly in Kiev, on Victory Day, and the numbers are very, very clear. 80% of targets are hit by drones. And Sunday was something unbelievable what Ukrainians managed to do, attacking Russian bombers in different airports, in Siberia and so on. And that is really what we can see as big change in the whole warfare. With the drones, both Ukrainians and Russians on the front line are able to create what somebody is calling Death Valley. 15 kilometers of zone, which is nobody can move. As Ukrainians are saying, traditional tank survives 6 minutes. Ukrainians for this year are planning to produce and to use 4 million drones. to defend their front line of 1,200 kilometers. So on the European continent, at this moment, we have two battle-tested armies with millions of drones. One is Ukrainian, another is Russian. Ukrainians are saying that Russians with drones are as good as Ukrainians and sometimes maybe even better. So when we are speaking about, and our intelligence services are openly warning us and predicting that Russia can test Article 5 during next 3 or 5 years, the question is for me very clear. Are we ready to face battle-tested Russian army with millions of drones? Recently, I was in London a few weeks ago, and I met with the famous Ukrainian General Zaluzhny, who was chief of staff of Ukrainian army from the very beginning of the war till 24. Now he's ambassador in London. And he said a very simple conclusion that for time being, only China and Russia are learning from the war in Ukraine, besides Ukrainians themselves. Europeans still more are ready for the war of yesterday. Maybe a good example to follow is yesterday announcement by United Kingdom of their new defense strategy, where they put very good title for their land forces, what they expect to do, 20-40-40. 20% of targets will be hit by heavy artillery and tanks, 40% by kamikaze drones, 40% by heavy drones. New United Kingdom strategy, which we can learn from that. So that is where we are. Second question: what we need to do, what we need to prepare to do. So as I said, I use this formula perfect storm. What we are facing now. But since I was prime minister, as it was said, 2008, when we needed to cut our salaries, and it was my, I don't know, fortune or whatever, that I was 2 times prime minister on both occasions during the crisis. And I learned, very, very well this formula that, don't waste good crisis, to make the needed reforms. And so now we're facing crisis in the defense. So time really for us to act, less to complain that Americans are withdrawing and so on. Let's act, and really let's be ready to cycle up the hill. So NATO summit and European Council in June are crucial with their strategic significance because it's good occasion for us to agree on what to do. And the good answer to, in some kind of philosophical meaning, what to do was given in Commission President Ursula von der Leyen Aachen speech when she was awarded Charlemagne Prize last week, and she put very clearly priority on 2, most important things for European Union: an independent Europe and Pax Europea. So I will quote, what Commission President have said. We cannot allow ourselves to be thrown off course by the seismic changes that we are facing. So that is a major message, and message which we can translate into very simple formulation. If we want peace in Europe, Pax Europea, we need to be ready to be independent. And definitely Pax Europea, or peace in Europe, is our strategic responsibility. Our responsibility, not American responsibility. We are grateful to Americans for their service to us till now, but we need to understand them when they ask us to take responsibility on European defense into our hands. Because Americans very much are concerned about other threats, in Indo-Pacific, in rising Chinese military power, and that is what should be the guiding principle for us. And really, that is why we need to be ready to be much more independent. But as twice prime minister of a country that became independent only in 1990s, I can say a few words. Independent does not mean alone. Independent also means together. Independence means the power to shape your own future, your own destiny. And we do that together, as we know, in the European Union and NATO, and with the Netherlands and all other members, and that is what we shall continue to do. Independence in defense for European Union means that we're need to be ready for equal burden sharing with our transatlantic allies in NATO. So the question is really, again, I will repeat what to do and how to build our independence in order to have Pax Europea. So I will start that question, first of all, asking myself and asking audience, what do we need to be ready for? What is coming and what should be our agenda? In short, taking into account today's geopolitical landscape, I can summarize our future defense agenda in a very simple way. First, we need to do everything for Europe to go up with all our material institutional defense capabilities. Second, we need to do everything materially and politically, I would stress, even politically, to push down Russia's capabilities to wage new aggression. Third, we need to be ready that United States will start to move, out from Europe, what they are declaring, and that means that we need to replace their capabilities here on European. We need to be ready to replace their capabilities here on the European continent. And the fourth, we need to be ready to rapidly bring Ukraine with its battle-tested military forces and innovative defense industry into a new European security architecture, with Ukraine urgently integrating into our defense structures. So we need Ukrainian integration. Not only Ukrainians need integration towards EU, but we need that integration. So this is an agenda as I see it, and this agenda, what I would like to stress, is broader than just the material side of our defense preparedness, with guns, tanks, and drones. We need to take care also about new institutional security architecture in Europe and about our geopolitical surrounding, how to make it less threatening to us. So that is, in my view, will be European defense policy, looking into the future, both into the nearest time future, but also into the longer time future. Now, I will try to run through more concrete details of this agenda. Again, those who want to read a little bit, broader, read my recent, statement in Aachen, but I will start from material preparedness. When we are talking about material preparedness, we need to have in mind several things. First of all, demand issues. Second, supply issues. Third, financial resources. And I would add, fourth, military mobility. On, demand. What we are trying to do now, we try to build the picture of what we call aggregated demand. What we as Europeans need, to have in order for us to be ready to defend ourselves and to deter. This aggregated demand will be constructed according to NATO capability targets. Militaries know very well what does it mean. Now NATO is concluding negotiations with member states on so-called capability targets. As publicly announced, NATO Supreme Allied Commander Transformation Admiral Pierre Vandier, in average, those new capability targets will be around of 30% bigger than the previous targets. But as Admiral said, the previous targets are not implemented also by 30%. So simple arithmetic is saying that now 30 and 30, those who are good in mathematics can very quickly, calculate that this is around of 50%, of theoretical target which we need to have. Now, really, in practice, we have only around of 50%. So the difference in between what we need to have according to capability targets and what we have now is around of 50%. Now, and of course, that costs money. I will not elaborate how much, but that costs money. Second is, when we are talking about material preparedness, is what I call replacement of US capabilities, because we also need to start to look into that. Well, I hope that, it will take time. It will not happen tomorrow, American, withdrawal from Europe. But what we need to have really is to have, again, rational agreement on implementation of progressive division of responsibilities with the United States, not angry divorce, and chaotic divorce tomorrow. And And this is what I would say is, in my view, the only way to keep good and rational relations with the United States on defense is to bring to them our very clear plans, how we are going to replace their capabilities, and not to accuse them of betrayal or to complain that they are forgetting us, and so on, which sometimes is happening. Implementation definitely will take time of that replacement. And recently there were several very important analytical papers. One was produced by International Institute of Strategic Studies, another one by European famous Bruegel. The cost to replace US resources, what now they are giving to us in Europe, means around $1 trillion additionally during several years. And second is additional 300,000 military personnel, which we need to have. So that is why we need really to concentrate on when we're talking about our material preparedness on, first of all, on so-called flagship projects, starting from strategic enablers, where we are heavily dependent on United States services, for example, space intelligence data, heavy cargo airlift services, and so on and so on. So those should be our priority. Now, on supply side, what we want to have when we shall have what we call aggregated demand picture, we want to have industry output plan. So what, how our industries can produce what we need. And besides that, to look much more deeply into what we call security of supply chains. Because definitely, I'm sometimes joking that I became during last several months expert on chemistry, nitrocellulose. That's what I learned, and where you cannot produce explosive if you do not have that chemical component, and we do not have that enough because everything again is in China, and we can talk about all other components which we need to take care. Now, second, when we're talking about supply and how we can help our industries to produce what we need, definitely we need to go into quite ambitious, what we call defense simplification omnibus. We shall have it on June 17. My team is very much involved into that, because we cannot have such a situation. What we have heard from, it was French industry, we had big so-called implementation dialogue with the industries, and one of the big companies, French defense companies, they said that officially in France, if you want to build a new defense factory or to expand your factory with the new facilities, it takes 5 years to have a permit. So either we shall build those factories after the war will be over with Putin aggression, or we need to ask Putin to postpone his plans, to attack us, So it's, and I would like here to use an opportunity to thank the Dutch Defense Minister for very strong initiatives on this, omnibus with his papers and letters. So that's very important. Second, definitely when we're talking about supply, again, we need, and we are planning to have later in the autumn, so-called roadmap for modernization of defense, with specific attention towards artificial intelligence and quantum. But the major message is very simple. We need to be ready for the wars of tomorrow, not for the wars of the past. And here will be very important for us also to have all the possible created platforms and cooperation things which would allow us to learn from industrial innovative success of Ukraine, which is really amazing. And again, when I was recently in Ukraine, I was told that the most active Europeans are Dutch businessmen, industrial people who are coming to Ukraine and working together with Ukrainians and inviting Ukrainians to establish here in Netherlands. I think this is a very good example. I hope that other industries from other countries will start to envy Netherlands and start to run also to Ukraine, and that is how we can push for Ukrainian integration. And the last point here is related with European Defense Industry Program, next regulation which we need to have, because what we need to have when we are talking about supply, we need to push much more for joint procurement and joint development of weapons, and that is where EDIP can be very much helpful. Now, a few words on financial resources. As you know, with Rearma Europe program, we created possibilities for member states to use additional 800 billion euros during the next 4 years. Last week, regulation on safe loans, attractive 150 billion euros value safe loans, were supported by EU, so AAA rating, 45 years maturity. That regulation is done. So now 2 months for member states to notify us about how much of those loans they want to use. Then 4 months to present clear defense investment plans. What is important is that those safe loans can be used by member states together with Ukraine, procuring from Ukraine and procuring for Ukraine. And that can be really a new breakthrough in our support to Ukraine. Now also so-called national escape clause, which is allowing member states to additionally to increase their defense spending by 1.5% of their GDP, and which will not be included into deficit. That is also will be used by 16 member states. 16 member states notified us about that, so it's good. Also, we created possibilities to invest and spend cohesion funds into defense industry and military mobility. That is also important. And also what was achieved after our conversations with the European Investment Bank, they changed their mandate, and now the so-called prohibited area for EIB investment is much more narrow, and EIB can invest into dual use and also into things related with defense. So that is on financial side, but I'm always repeating that Rearma Europe program, from my point of view, is just the first step. We shall see what is needed looking into the future. Now, on military mobility, we have 4 corridors for military mobility. Together with other commissioners, our evaluation recently made is showing that we have 500 so-called hotspots where infrastructure is not ready for military mobility. The cost to improve that situation is around 70 billion euros. We need to see how we can do that. But in addition to that, also besides infrastructure, we need to go for also quite ambitious simplification in military mobility, creating so-called military Schengen, because now if you want to bring your military personnel or military goods from Netherlands to Lithuania, you will be stopped on each border, and that really you can lose quite a lot of time. In addition to that, we need to look into what we call logistics of military mobility and protection of most important infrastructure. And in the autumn, we shall come with joint communication on military mobility, which will cover those important material things in our defense. Now a little bit out from material things into institutional and geopolitical. Few words. First of all, few words about peace on the European continent. As I said before, I do not see that diplomacy to end the war in Ukraine will help, because Putin does not want peace. That is what we need to understand. Second, of course, we cannot be sure how United States will behave looking into the future on Ukrainian issues, but we need to be ready that also they will perhaps diminish their role in that on that issue. So that means that peace in Europe, peace in Ukraine will become a responsibility for European Union, where we need to change our mentality. Till now, my feeling was that always we as Europeans, we're waiting for peace. That in some way that peace will come. Either Ukrainians will win the war, as we were hoping, at the very beginning. Then we were expecting that, President Biden will bring. Then for some time we were expecting that President Trump will bring. Then we were waiting also for some kind of miraculous phone calls in between of somebody and Putin, or let's say that meeting in Vatican, will help, resolve that problem. So this waiting is not, really bringing the outcome. So in my view, we need to change our mentality from waiting for peace into creation of peace. And here I see the only one, way is really to implement formula peace through strength and additional strength for Ukraine. And that strength can come, additional strength can come mainly only from European Union. That's my point. And I'm always asking, myself a very simple question. Why, when we're talking about our defense and what are our plans, and we know that in NATO here can be, very important decisions made, when NATO member states will agree to spend on defense up to 3.5% of our GDP. But for Ukraine annually, till now, during all 3 years of the war, we were giving each year around of 20 billion euros. The same was from American side, 20 billion euros, and 20 billion euros for us and for Americans separately means that we were giving less than 0.1% of our GDP as a military support to Ukraine. And I'm always asking, I don't understand this, military logic. When we understand that, Ukraine is defending us, and we are not really investing into our defense as we need to invest, making much stronger support to Ukraine. So here I would repeat again, safe loans, which are now the new instrument, with possibility for member states to take those loans and to spend them together with Ukraine and procuring weapons from Ukraine, in my view, can become a real breakthrough in building Ukrainian strength. Now, few words on what I call institutional side of our defense. So, when Russians are still up in, what I am using this terminology, that we need to push Russians down, but still they are up, and Americans are preparing, for withdrawal, we need to bring Ukrainians in, because they have battle-tested strongest army in democratic Europe. On another side, we have, battle-tested Russian army, and Ukrainians also have the best innovative defense industry. And that is why, in my view, we need to start discussions about what I call new European security architecture, or true European Defense Union. That is in my mission letter also. And, European Defense Union with Ukraine and United Kingdom and Norway as part of that, Defense Union. Integration of Ukraine, in my view, is needed for European Union, and on defense side, even more than, for Ukrainian itself. And as I said, in my view, Dutch defense industry understands that very much. So second, next point, in what we need to talk also about common European defense. I know that this is, discussion which can start now, but it can go for quite a long period of time. But I would remind that in, Treaty of European Union, Article 42, Part 2, treaty says European Union defense policy should include progressive framing of a common Union defense policy. This will lead to common defense when Council will agree. My question is, at what time, if not now, we should start to discuss that, when we are really facing defense crisis, and when, treaty is saying that this is not only opportunity for us to create, but this is an obligation for us to frame more of common European defense policy. And that is why when I'm trying to understand, so what should we do and what does it mean European Defense Union? I would, I'm always remembering that back in 1952, our, godfathers of our European Union, Adenauer, Schuman, Monnet, and de Gasperi, were really attempting to create a European defense community. So I am not saying that let's repeat the same what they were, doing at that time, but this ambition that we need to be, much more common in our defense policy, we can borrow from that period of time. And I will not elaborate. Yeah, I think that I took too much of time, and I think that we are, one thing which I am always wondering, why we as Europeans do not have a clear strategy on Russia itself. in my view, defense as defense, as such, should be, concentrating on two issues. One is how to increase your own defense capabilities. That is what we're doing. But second is how to decrease your adversary capabilities. And definitely, having in our neighborhood post-imperial, authoritarian, aggressive Russia, it will be always a threat to us. I mean, when I'm talking about strategy towards Russia, I'm asking myself why we are not trying to look into possibilities to help Russian people to transform their country back to normality. It's not for us, to do something, but Russian people can do something. And here I see always that our strategy on Ukraine, not only assisting Ukraine to defend itself, but also assisting Ukraine to create a success story through integration towards EU, through economical development, like we did, we're a success story in Lithuania, because we integrated towards EU. We were helped, This Ukrainian strategy with creation of Ukrainian success can have a major impact in, how Russian people will see their perspective. That is what we need not to forget. So that's why I'm saying that, let's also take this responsibility on the European continent. What kind of strategy we need to have, towards Russia on our own shoulders. Till now, again, we were following mainly, our transatlantic friends. When they were saying that Russia is, evil empire, we were repeating. When they were saying, let's reset, relations with Russia, we were also following that. We know where we are now, So that is, again, I would say, our big responsibility. And, what is, last point, what I see as some kind of, again, positive, positive signs of development. Usually, crisis creates the leadership. That was, after the Second World War, when we know, Adenauer, Schuman, Monnet, De Gasperi, Churchill were creating, European community as a consequence of the previous war and the threat of Stalinist Soviets, influence on all the Europe. Very important role was played by Dutch politician Bayern, I learned even his name. So now we see that really this crisis is creating some kind of collective leadership of, Ursula von der Leyen, Merz, Macron, Starmer, Tusk, Meloni. And that is where really your leadership on defense and security, Dutch leadership, can play a very important role. And you are playing a very important role with, protection, Baltic waters and protecting NATO and European Union airspace. So that is what is very much appreciated. And that is why, we can build our how you call it, we can reimagine European defense only being really very much united and very much, building that unity, which we call for time being European Union, and I hope that we shall call it, for forever as European Union, and the Netherlands are at the heart of this union. Thanks a lot.
Wow. Thank you so much. So